If you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable, you forfeit your greatness. If you don't risk failure, you have no shot at being the one who makes a statement. If you don't risk them laughing at you, you have no shot at them clapping for you. If you don't risk trading today for a future outcome that's uncertain, you'll never know the fortune that future held. Yeah, being vulnerable, it's difficult. It's hard, it hurts, but it has to. It's the ocean that separates what you have from what you want. The mountain that stands between who you are and who you want to be. And being vulnerable, it means you stop looking at what can go wrong and you start thinking about what can go right. Because every question's a double-edged sword. Right? Do you release that song? Because it could flop, but it will also kickstart your dream. Do you make that first trip to the gym? Because you'll probably look like you have no clue what you're doing, but it could also lead you to feeling better about yourself than you ever have before. Do you apply for that promotion? Because you could be let down. But it could also lead to a career transformation. Do you see the dynamic here? Every major decision comes with risk, and that's why people avoid making them. Standing out, taking the road less traveled, they shake our deeply rooted desire to fit in, right at the foundation. They conflict like fire and water. See, so much of our stress comes from a need to belong, to preserve a reputation, to be cool. You want a fun experiment? Watch how fast being cool turns into mediocrity. It's doing the things that are not cool over and over again that constitute greatness. The ones who are different, bold, out there, they change things. The ones who are okay being called irrational, okay being laughed at, okay with failing and not getting it the first time around. If you do not let yourself be vulnerable, you never experience failure on a significant level. You don't fail, you don't learn, you don't learn, you don't grow. And if that's the case, forget about the top of the mountain. Safety, comfort, a flawless reputation gets you a nice seat at the bottom looking up at greatness, at those who saw the opportunity and were willing to take a chance. So while you climb, keep your eyes on that big picture. Remember that we outgrow our worries. Through each stage of our lives, we look back and we realize that our previous priorities were misaligned. We worried about things that didn't matter, allowed our decisions to be guided by variables that were irrelevant. And that's the beauty of risk. It escalates this realization, pushes us further and further past the little things that mean less and less with each step taken. Your mistakes will not matter. Criticism from strangers will not matter. What will matter is whether you took control and did something meaningful with your life, whether you followed your heart and your instinct. And I know it's hard, I know it's uncomfortable. I can't sit here and guarantee the path will be paved out in gold, everything will go how you want, but I can promise this: you will learn, you will adapt, and move forward. I can promise that the critics and the naysayers get smaller and smaller until they fade out of the picture altogether. And most importantly, I can promise that if you don't do anything, you will not go anywhere, and that is the only way to fail. So trust yourself. Trust the process. Believe that you are extraordinary, and go make your magic. There's a quote from Henry David Thoreau that I've learned to love over the years. He says, "We are constantly invited to be who we are." Meaning, essentially, there is always a hand, reaching out to invite us to leave the confinement we've allowed to become our lives, the pressure of the outside world, and attack a world that means the most to us, not obligatory, but for the opportunity. Because it's there, it's perpetually available, and that's what Henry David Thoreau means. And what's interesting is the second we lose sight of this, our lives become consumed with things that really have no relevance to our goals or our objectives. In fact, the daily routine becomes the goal. It's the box that needs to be checked to feel accomplished. We do things because, isn't that what you're supposed to do? Adhere to rules and processes and guidelines, almost like we forget why that routine matters. Like we forget the car has to go somewhere of relevance. You don't just get in and drive it to drive it. That doesn't make sense. And a friend of mine recently showed me this book of insights from different photographers. It's called The Photographer's Playbook, and it's life lessons that helped each one of them along the way. And one that stood out to me specifically was Andrea Parleto. And she talked about a concept called hibernation, or cutting off, temporarily leaving your day-to-day or your craft, so that all the have-tos and the should-bes can dissipate. And you can ask yourself the question that we so quickly lose. The question that should be the target, that should be the foundation we build upon. Who do you want to be? Because when all is said and done, and you're looking back, that's what will matter. That's what will dictate your happiness. Not that you were 5 for 5 on your checklist every day on your 20s, 30s, 40s, and on, right? No, what does it look like when you peel that back? What does it look like under the surface? What makes you, you? And sometimes we have to step back, go away, leave the day-to-day world we've created to see life from a different angle. Eliminate the steps, the requirements, the technicalities, and what are you left with when you put your head on the pillow at night? What makes you smile? Bronnie Ware states in her book, Regrets of the Dying, that not living a life true to oneself was one of the greatest regrets people experienced. Isn't it worthy of your time, your attention? Don't you owe it to yourself to make sure that your vision is defined and your actions support that? See, anyone can move just to move, and anyone can breathe just to breathe. But the ones who make the most of each step, each breath, they put themselves in position to live life differently, to accept the invitation to be who they truly are, to take their inspiration, their gifts, and their dreams and never look back. Do you ever wonder how much of you has materialized? Like if what F. Scott Fitzgerald says is true and our lives are defined by opportunity, even the ones we miss, then how much remains in the ether? And I don't think it's about playing a game of what if. That would be endless. It would be self-defeating. No one's perfect. I don't even really think it's about making a right turn instead of a left. Because as long as you're moving, and moving with conviction, life ultimately brings you where you need to be. But more, my concern is the steps never brought to pavement. My ideas unhatched, my opportunities I either knowingly or unknowingly left on the shelf. Because it didn't seem real enough. Like a Broadway play between my ears that as a spectator I knew would end. After all, that's what stories do. How much of ourselves have we cast aside as simply the things we don't say out loud? At first, it's infinite. We've yet to be taught to limit because limits aren't things, they're ideas, and ideas must be adopted. That's why they say some of life's best things were done by people too ignorant to know they were impossible, too naive of the notion that they couldn't say them out loud. Then it's comparison. They have what I want, but it was meant for them and not me. How delusional to think I could have it. How crazy to think that life has yet to be written, and I am an author. My date is with normalcy in the box where I keep those things we don't say out loud, and then we look around and we see highlight reels, we see awards and vacations and smiles, but we don't stop to think maybe they're just like me. Maybe they're people who struggle and question themselves and doubt the road ahead. No, it must be the paths diverged. They took happiness and I took those things we don't say out loud. And then there's everyday life when things don't go as planned, when the world presents curveballs and you haven't learned to hit off speed, so you feel small and you feel inadequate and ill-equipped, and you could reach out, but that's not cool, that's not right. That's something that you don't say out loud, but we keep it in, like all in, and eventually it becomes the if-onlys and I wish I hads. It's the quiet envy gazing longingly towards those who just cared less, who realize maybe life's not as serious as we make it out to be, who turn thoughts to things not by burying but by embodying them. And maybe that's the trick, to unlock the gate, keeping your perceived reality from the possibility of a new one, the one you could create if only you promoted your fleeting thoughts to forward progress. See, dreams can fail to come to fruition in two places, in your head and outside of it. But at least outside it has a chance. At least outside you can take the common, normal, everyday background and make it the backdrop to your movie where you play a lead role. But it must be accepted and acknowledged, not thought of or even whispered, but screamed, so that the details and the trivialities that exist now work for you. That's right, they are now yours. Not because you thought about it, but because you reached out a hand and you took. You asked the world for something. And in life, it will always be true that you don't get what you do not ask for. So when you find yourself staring up a wall comprised of self-defeating narratives and manufactured limits, be ignorant, be irrational, be the reason your dreams have a chance. And when you look around and you see more and wonder why you don't have it, know that you can. You're allowed to. If you sacrifice, you will. But you must believe you are worthy of it. Not in the back of your head where you keep your locker combo and movie quotes, but in reality, where words bounce off lips. And when you feel like life is treating you unfairly, like they're happier or have it better, know that life is peaks and valleys, not just for you, but for everyone. And how you internalize that and carry on makes the difference. And when you feel lost or stuck, you are not hopeless, but in progress. Being broken down so that you can be reconstructed, stronger, better. Victory is not in hiding those struggles, but accepting them as the difference, as the reason you created the miraculous. Not because you had dreams, but because you said them out loud. I always believed that possibilities were infinite, that nothing was off limits. And so I collected in this box my plans. And man, I had such a full agenda, right? If you look inside, you could see them. That one in the back, that was the plan I made to leave my job and start over. And there, that was where I was going to build a better relationship with my sisters. That one, that was piano. I was going to learn to play piano. And that one, that's where I was going to move to a little cottage on the lake. I've always dreamed of seeing the sunrise over the water. And that's where I was going to start the business and begin a family. That's where I'd run my first marathon. But time slipped away, and plans seemed to accumulate. The box became more and more full, and I started to realize that it was simply a holding pattern for a life I wasn't living. These little plans were IOUs, kept in a box to remind me what was real and what was not. Maybe I missed the point. So I put down the box, slid it back under the bed, and I stepped out my front door and little by little began piecing together that new life. The job, the city, the cottage by the lake, the piano, the new relationships. I immersed myself in the detail. And what I saw was a life changing in front of me, not because of plans, but because I moved forward without them. As the saying goes, if you wait for the perfect moment, you will be waiting for the rest of your life. While the things you want most, they remain tucked neatly away on a shelf, gathering dust, evolving into could-bes or would-haves. So now I keep that box empty, facing my bed, so when I wake up every morning, I remind myself to leave nothing for someday.